Welcome to Your Story, His Glory with Janelle Burker. Today we are going to interview someone that is extremely special and important in my life, Joey Burker, my husband. And I'm so excited to get to talk with him and ask him all the questions. I also want you to know that we did not sit down and talk about the list of things I cannot ask. So what you get is real and raw and authentic, and I think you will see that that is who we are and part of our relationship. And we're so glad to welcome you today, Joey. And from the get-go, people have asked me, so when are you going to interview Joey? I know he has a great testimony. I know he has important things to say. And the answer was whenever God directs us to. So he has opened the doors for this to happen, and I'm so grateful. So welcome.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Would you like to give a little intro of yourself, tell the audience a little bit about you?
That can be difficult. It depends on how deep we want to go, but you know this, but I am the second youngest of actually 11 children. I have my dad was married once before my mom, and I have 5 siblings from that side, and then I have 6 with the same mother. So yeah, I'm born and raised in this area in East Tennessee. It's been quite the journey. It's been fun and interesting, and I don't know where I'm going with this.
So I love that, because that is your personality. It's been fun and interesting, because the things that you are going to say, many people would not describe in that way. And so that is the thing that I'm excited for you to get to, because the way that God has shaped your life, many people would not choose hope and freedom and joy in that situation. So let's start with when you were about 5 years old, and I do know this part of your background, I believe. And I think you know where I'm going.
Well, maybe, but I mean, we could even go back further than that. So, I mean, a lot of times in your podcast, you ask people how they come to know Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. And it's not one definitive moment in my life. I can kind of point to different things, but there's not this, yes, this is the definitive. I gave my life to, I'm declaring Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and this is where I can, plant my flag and say from here, henceforth I was a Christian. That really wasn't the experience. I've always felt God's presence and His leading and guiding and directing in my life for, really as long as I can remember. So, I grew up really poor, not just struggling to make ends meet. When I was kind of newborn up till about 1 or 2, we lived in a trailer that burnt down, and then we lived in what I remember, I think I was about 3, is like literally like a 2-room shack. Had an outhouse, again, I remember back all this stuff, and it's like an adventure. It's not this, it's not this Charles Dickens type story for me. From there, we bounced around a lot as a kid. My father, my mom and dad were together, but my father was an angry alcoholic. He was an angry drunk, and he was always drunk. So we had just unique challenges. All my brothers and sisters did. We bounced around. We lived with my grandmother at one point, who didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. You know this, but my grandmother was Cherokee Indian. And so she had some unique challenges. She also was an alcoholic. We lived with her, and my dad, they argued constantly.
That would have been explosive.
Yes, it was not a good mix. At one point, we lived in a one-room hotel motel in downtown Elizabethton.
So this is 6 children,
Yeah.
2 adults.
Yeah. Well, one of my sisters actually didn't stay with us. My oldest sister is actually in, it gets a little bit confusing. So my dad was married once before, and his wife was also an alcoholic, and they had an explosive relationship. He grew up in Maryland, lived in Maryland. His parents were Mennonites. You can extrapolate whatever you want for that to mean. My dad did not. He had a very strict upbringing, from what I understand. He didn't talk a lot. We didn't share a lot with what his childhood was like. So I never had a relationship with those 5 brothers and sisters. I met them, and they're completely adults when I'm a little kid. They are in their 30s and 40s and had children my age or older than me when I met them. So my mom and dad got together, and my mom had already had a daughter before that. And so I didn't have really a relationship with her either. So my 5 brothers and sisters who, that I semi grew up with, they weren't around a long time, but that I grew up with. So it was us. And so we bounced around a lot. I know I mentioned that. It's funny, as we were kind of preparing for this, I thought about that hotel room in downtown Elizabethton that's on the 2nd floor. And I can vividly picture us all sleeping on the floor, like having your spot. And to go to the bathroom, you had to go out and down the hall to like this communal bathroom, and it was so scary to me as a little boy. Had another adventure where we lived at Watauga Lake for a while. Lived in a tent. You can imagine 5 kids and 2 adults living in a tent. Again, that was an adventure. To me, I look back on it fondly, but I know that was hard and tough.
When I've spoken with your siblings, they do talk about how difficult that time was, and how difficult, getting up and having nothing, and having a hard time just figuring out what they were going to have to eat, and just the turmoil within that. And it's quite the contrast from the things that I believe the Lord has allowed you to remember and frame those pieces in. So it's so hard sometimes to see that this is the exact same experience. I recently heard another girl mentioning this about a sibling, that you come away with an entirely different interpretation of, yet you both lived it. It's fascinating, but it's also a beautiful way to recognize we're all individual, and the Lord can take things that may be destructive in the life of some people and can make that beautiful in the life of others.
Yeah, I can see God's hand, providence in multiple ways. I feel sorrow for my siblings in that, I'm 4 probably at that point. And it's not the same for a 4-year-old as it is for an elementary or a junior high kid living in a tent. And, we've joked about this. My family had this giant station wagon. It was huge. And it had the rear door that swung open, and had the seats in the back that looked out,
Face backwards.
Yes. And we used to load that thing up full of coal. And so it was always, if you sat back there, you were always black. Like you just had coal dust always on you. And so we used coal to heat, to warm. You throw it in a bin. And so there was, again, I I don't want people to hear this and be sad or to I still have joy from all of that. I mean, God has used it in such a unique, miraculous way in my life where he's used all these little things. And as we explain more, you'll hopefully understand that to be just Ebenezer's kind of in my life, like just these rocks that I look back on it and I have joy with them. I wouldn't change anything. So we go from, it'll sound weird, but this blessing of being homeless to getting into the projects in Elizabethton. So we moved into government housing, into a house for the first time in my life. I'm 5 years old. I'm starting kindergarten. So that, I mean, people are like, oh, you lived in the projects. Yeah, it was amazing to kind of, to have my own, I never had my own room ever, but to be in an actual place that had a bathroom, that had indoor plumbing. I was probably 5 years old before we ever had indoor plumbing. Wow. That's a crazy concept. I mean, sometimes we lived in a place that had running water, but you would always, I mean, I had an outhouse at multiple places I lived for the first 5 years of my life.
And this was in the 80s, so
Yeah.
it is hard to really get your mind wrapped around that. But
I'm not that old. Yeah.
right. And within the 80s, there was also a different concept of poor. When you said, I was poor, there's not poor like you're talking about today, because there is a lot of help and there's a lot of kind people who grew up like you did and understand what poor is and say, I don't want a child to ever be hungry. I don't want a child to ever be afraid to walk down the hallway to go to the bathroom because you don't know who else is around you. You know, I think there are plenty of opportunities for people to express that they have compassion for people who've been places where you have been, because they understand as well. So, and that's part of my hope in talking about this story, is other people saying, you know what, I grew up like that too. And it is hard for me to look at. It's hard for me to talk about. And it is hard for me to understand how to see good in those places. And so
it's interesting, you know, that point. I mean, I see how God put both Christians and non-Christians in my path. Like he used multiple people to point me towards him.
Will you talk about that a little more?
Sure. So once I moved into the projects, I started kindergarten. I went to Southside Elementary in Elizabethton. That school's long gone.
Doesn't even exist.
Yeah. My kindergarten teacher, Miss Patrick, was amazing. So sweet and so kind. She pointed me to Jesus. Like I went to such a small little school where multiple teachers you knew were Christians, and looking back on it, you knew like immediately. But their kindness, their faithfulness. My first grade teacher, Joyce Julian, you know her, you know the Julian family. She invited me to Eastside Free Will Baptist Church. And so I had gone to church before that. My parents never went to church. I'm trying to think if there was ever a time other than when we got married that my mother ever came to church with me. And and my dad never came to church. I think when we got married was the first time my mother ever stepped inside of a church with me.
That's interesting. And I know that she talked about God's influence and things of a spiritual nature in her life, but that was not lived out in an example of a traditional.
I don't think she understood grace and mercy. She never really, and you know, it's a type of pride. I think we won't admit it, but I'm too bad. My sin is too great. I don't live the life that, you know, makes me worthy of Jesus' love, you know.
And quite honestly, she would have just had a huge fat on her hand
Yeah.
if she would have gone.
Yeah.
So,
she encouraged us. It sounds foreign today, but lots of churches had bus and van ministries. And so I had a very troubled home life. And so I took every opportunity I could to get out. And so if a bus or van came through the projects, I got on it. And so thankfully, Eastside Free Will Baptist was very dedicated in that. They ran a blue bus for a long time. It was blue and white, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night, and other times. And they had wonderful, they were godly men who volunteered and drove that bus and van for years and years and years.
That gave you consistency in your life. And I know that those people that worked that ministry loved the bus kids, and they loved, interacting with you all, and often knew the troubles that you all saw, and went a step further and bought you lunch. Went a step further and made sure that at Christmas you got some specific gifts and things like that. And those people who had that love and that vision for evangelism and that they might be planting some seeds in the life of a 5-year-old.
And I don't even know if everyone is that far sighted. Like they're looking, this is what I'm, being intentional in that.
This is true.
I think a lot of times you're just called to be faithful. And there's not this, I'm going to invest in this little ragamuffin. I think there were men who just said, this is what God has called me to do. That's to get up early, get to church, get a bus ready and drive it, and to go home late to my family. And man, I love those guys.
Yeah.
Many of their names, but Gene Fleener and Phil Stanley and Floyd Reeser, John Richardson. I'm sitting here because of them. And we won't get real emotional. How God used them. It's just amazing. Again, Julian, my first grade teacher in a public school, invited me to church. That's semi-illegal depending on what state you live in now. I did. She invested in me, all the way up into her death. She just loved on me and hugged on me anytime she saw me, and would always tell me how proud she was of me. I didn't get that at home. My mom did her very best, but she just didn't have a lot of tools and resources, didn't have the knowledge. My mom had basically a 6th grade education. She dropped out of school at 7th grade to take care of her brothers and sisters, and just worked a full-time job. Imagine we have a 7th grader.
Right.
Can you imagine her dropping out of school and getting a job to support her family?
Not even a second.
Yeah, it's a crazy thought, but that's what she did. And so she just kind of started behind the 8 ball, so to speak.
For sure.
And so her and my dad had such a toxic relationship. My dad was older, of course, when I was born. He was already 49 when I was born. And it's funny, I was just talking to one of my older brothers here just last week. And his memories of our father are completely different than mine. He talks about, them playing and doing them, throwing the ball back and forth and racing and just, the things they did. And the dad I knew was, he smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. He drank constantly, was just hateful and mean.
And there's only 8-9 years between you and that brother who had that completely different experience. I heard him speaking about that, and I was totally shocked. And just from what I knew of your father, I had a hard time even visualizing your father get up out of the bed to do those things. And, but it warmed my heart. And I'm so glad, because some of the older ones saw much more difficult life. But I'm grateful that he has some of those sweet memories to even hold on to. And it's nice to hear some positive things.
I think my dad had some probably pretty good attributes, and at different times. I didn't get to experience a lot of those until he was much older and really infirmed. Near, the last 3 or 4 years before he died, we had a better relationship. Before that, I mean, he's abusive. I mean, physically, emotionally, mentally, he just. So my mom had a rough time. We had a rough time. It was difficult. It made me very self-conscious of my lack at school. I didn't have new clothes. I didn't have clean clothes. I didn't have many clothes. And so the church was still important. You kind of touched on that. They would show up at Christmas and bring me Christmas presents. They'd bring me these horrible shoes that they're, not like penny loafers, but like a stiff, rigid, I'm a little boy. What am I going to do in those shoes? My tennis shoes have holes in them, but they're still better, like they're a dress shoe. I know that it was a kindness, but it was, I remember those shoes.
So they brought you something that you should wear to church.
They brought me church clothes. Yeah. Yes. And, and they were wretched.
I think that also speaks to, a time where people don't pry into other people's business. People had a misunderstanding of the lack that there was in your life. I think people, there was a bit of an expectation that you don't pry into someone else's family, even if you see the need, even if you see something that you could do that would be helpful.
It's funny is because I thought I was so good at covering that up and hiding it, that people didn't know that I was different, that I didn't have what they had, or I didn't look like I think mentally, I think it's actually just a self-protective kind of thing. It made me super self-aware and self-conscious, which now I see as attributes, and I'm like, oh, that's a great thing. Then is horrible.
So what are the good things that you see in being self-aware?
I usually instantly, this, but I mean, I've been in sales and marketing for 30 years, and I know how people are perceiving me. I usually can read a room pretty quick. I can usually tell by body language and the words and things, whether they're buying what I'm selling, whether they're interested in what I'm, talking about.
I'll add to that. That is your superpower. I mean, that is the thing that probably was one of the most difficult things that you really perfected and have been able to use as a great tool in your life.
I mean, it's obviously a blessing from God that He's used this really horrible thing and made it something extraordinary in my life. It's allowed me to be successful. It's allowed me to make friends. It's allowed me to grow and achieve in areas I never thought. I mean, I've shared this with you before, but I never thought I would live very long. I never had dreams or expectations. So my mom is literally, walking to work, struggling to keep food on the table. My dad is smoking and drinking every penny we get. And so I never had an expectation of, you're going to go to high school, you're going to graduate, you're going to go to college, you're going to have this job. I never thought I would be married or have children or even live as long. I know that sounds drastic and very dark, but it just wasn't, it wasn't an expectation. It wasn't even it would have been silly to dream that way. I mean, honestly, and I know that sounds very odd, but it was just my life. And so I had a lot of anger at God as a kid, which will come into play as kind of talk about that transit. So I grew up in church, which is weird because I didn't have parents who took me to church, but I was in church every time the doors were open. Not for seeking God, but to seek relief and safety and sanctuary. We don't have to go into it, but if there's an abuse, I had it, not just from my dad, but from other things. So whether it be physical, sexual, emotional, mental abuse, all those things I had experienced as a kid kind of shaped and formed me. And so I had this running dialogue, running conversation with God my whole life. And I don't know that we've ever talked about this, is, I would go peaks and valleys of being really angry at God, bargaining with God. God, if you allow me to do this, then I'll do this. And I know that lots of people have shared that. But I remember as a little kid, first grade, second grade, having that conversation with God. If you will just help me in this situation, or make a way of escape, or get me out of this, then I will do X, Y, and Z. Whether that was to serve you, I'll be a better boy, I'll be a better person. I'll try harder, I'll work harder. Of course, that's a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding. But even in those things, God was merciful and he was kind. And I see that now. Always at that moment, you know this. You look back and you can kind of see God's hand. You can see his mercy and his grace. But in the midst of it, a lot of times you're just crying out, why? Why is this happening? What's this for? What's the benefit? With maturity, you can see those things. And I am thankful. I am appreciative of all those things. I wouldn't change anything. I know that's a weird thing to say. I wouldn't change anything because it's formed me. It's allowed me to see God's goodness and his kindness, even in those things. It's allowed me to pour into other people. It's allowed me to disciple and mentor in ways that I would never be able to. I can identify, I can empathize with people. So it's a crazy adventure.
So you mentioned, a lack of vision, a lack of expectation of living. I have since found out that is a trauma response. And so other people
use those big
this little grouping though, I think so if other people are hearing that, the first time I heard it, I thought that is the most bizarre thing ever. I've never understood how you think of yourself as not existing again. And that I found out that is just a way of self-preservation through a difficult situation.
I can see that now. Of course, then, my brothers and sisters all had drug and alcohol problems. The brother we were just talking about, he's doing heavy drugs at 13. That's a crazy guy. He gets taken and has to go to juvenile detention centers. He's in prison after he turns 18 for 20 plus years. My older brother left our house, I think when he was either 13 or 14. My dad hit him in the head with an axe handle. Split his head open. He's bleeding and he never came back. And so I didn't have anybody to protect me. My older sister graduated high school, but she got married immediately to an abusive man. Shocker. Mm-hmm. And left. My younger sister, who's just a couple years older than I am, left fairly early as well because she I mean, I don't blame them. I mean, you had to get out. I mean, there was a very real chance that you might not make it out if you didn't leave. And so they all, unfortunately, they all struggled with drugs and alcohol, like I said, made poor choices, poor, not just career choices, but relationships, bad choices. My sisters all, chose bad men, a lot of times who treated them poorly. My brothers, coped with drugs and alcohol. So, for most of my childhood, it was just me and my younger brother at home. And we have an interesting relationship. We did. To go back a step, I left you out in this. At Eastside Free Will Baptist, that little blue and white bus, not little, it's a giant bus, that drove through the projects, took me to Eastside, where I met you, where I met, in fourth grade. That's crazy. I met your parents who taught children's church. So it's interesting to look back now and to see how God just placed these people in my life who at the time I didn't recognize were discipling and mentoring me, some of them against their will. There were, I did have a reputation. A lot of us bus kids were mean. We didn't come to church to sit in the pew and to hear about God. We came to just because it was not home. It was different. And so it was an adventure. One of the really neat things that I look back on now is these people that invested in me. This lady, her name's Sandra Crow, who got me to do Bible memorization. So in the Free Will Baptist kind of community, they had these competitions. Is that what you would, organizations where they did, they had these different
association.
Yeah, but they had these different categories. Like for little kids, like till third grade, you did Bible memorization. And so you had to memorize long parts of different things. It was not just Psalm 23 or the Beatitudes. You'd have sections of the Bible that you memorized, and then you would recite that in front of these people who would judge you, and you could win. And so from that, I went from Bible memorization to sword drill. Do you remember sword drill?
I remember
Sword drill, you had to find, whether it was a verse or a book or whatever, the fastest, and then step forward. And I smoked every kid in our church in that. We did that every Wednesday night, like you would train. And so then we would go and compete against other kids at other churches. So so it was Grace here in Johnson City. They were our big rival. I don't know if you recall that.
I remember.
And I beat everyone. And then it was Bible tic-tac-toe. And we won the state and went to national competitions in Washington, D.C. And I was always the kind of the wild card in those things, because they didn't know if I would be there or if I'd know my part or I never studied. It wasn't like I was training for that stuff at home. But I look back now and I go, what a great thing that was. It gave me an interest in the Bible. It got me reading. I knew all my books of the Bible. I knew all these verses. Like at the time I wasn't doing it for God's glory. But now I can look back and see how pivotal and instrumental it has been, even in my walk. So
it's good.
It's just fun stuff,
That is great to see those little pieces come together as an adult, and even those who are working in children's ministry, and trying to make it fun for kids, and how that they are actually planting those seeds that are bringing that person closer to the Lord and having a better understanding of who He is. So will you tell us, let's jump in a little further into your relationship with God. you said that it was more of a process in becoming a Christian, but would you talk to us a little bit more about those specifics?
Yes. So this running dialogue prayer I had with God, I felt I knew the Ten Commandments, and I knew sin. Like I know, oh, I've done this wrong. But I thought of God as a very vengeful, and that's why I was leading the life I had the life I had, because I was bad. I was not worthy, not good enough, that's how I felt as a kid. And you know this, but in a Free Will Baptist church, they talked a lot about backsliding or kind of losing your salvation or not, So, I mean, every Sunday I got saved because I heard a new Bible story or a new message, a new sermon, a preacher. And so every time I knew that I had sinned all week, I needed to get saved again. And so the definitive kind of the point I look at and I know is, this man, Al Hughes, that I listened to a sermon, and at the time I knew I've joked about it before, as an asbestos suit. I just didn't want to go to hell. I just wanted to escape that. Not so much this amazing love for Jesus who gave himself for me, who died for me, who has now made me, an atonement for me, that I'm now right with the Father. None of that. I didn't understand that level. It was very much they were scaring me straight. They were scaring me. I didn't want to go to hell. Who wants to go to hell? I'm going to do this. So I walk down the aisle. I kneel and pray with a man named Al Hughes, who led me down the Romans road to salvation, and just every step of it. And I gave my life to the Lord. That's, I prayed I said the prayer. I followed him in this. And I remember that. I was right about 12 years old. And so I'm a Christian, right? But I didn't have a real understanding of what that meant. I mean, truthfully, again, it was to escape this eternal torment, punishment, hell, not the love and the mercy and the grace. There wasn't a real, I mean, would you agree with that? That there was this conversation, this, at the church we grew up in, they didn't focus on grace and mercy.
Yes, I would agree. However, from looking at your background, I can see how clearly you would understand a wrathful God, and how clearly you would recognize an escape was necessary. And so, although that is not fantastic theology, it was a way that you interpreted life already. And so maybe those were the things that you understood well. And it brought you into a reconciliation and hopefully taking more steps into relationship.
It did, but it was a long process. And so I would go back and forth of, I'm losing my salvation. I'm not saved. I need to recommit my life.
And that is not the message of the gospel. The gospel is that Jesus paid the price for us, period. So that God looks at him and his sacrifice and his goodness and his blood covering all of our wrong. And that we are reconciled with God, not because of anything we did, not because of the prayer we prayed, but because Jesus paid the penalty for our sin. Those were messages that were given in that church also, but it wasn't emphasized in living out our faith in a way that I understood.
And maybe I couldn't hear it, or I didn't hear it correctly. I've sat under 26 years of Pastor Reggie now, and so that seems obvious. I didn't have a good theology. I didn't have, and so I just struggled with that for many, many years, not understanding, not knowing. And what a freedom there is now in understanding it's not me. It's not about me. It never was. Right. It never has to be. Like, there's such a freedom in that. And that's why you can know that you know. Like, people are like, oh, they struggle with their salvation, or it's not on me. And so there's such a freedom in that, and there's such a joy. And that's why I know it's crazy and odd. Would you say I'm a pretty well-adjusted person, considering?
I would say that you are very well-adjusted and have been very adaptable in lots of different situations, but that is mostly because you're a smart guy.
It makes no sense, but God has just freed me from the burden of sin and shame, of trauma. I haven't sat through, and I'm not denouncing any counseling or ministry or anything that way, but I've not had any of those things. Like, I've not had to work through those things, because God really has just relieved those burdens from me.
I see a compassion in you from your past. But I also think that compassion is because you have an understanding of Jesus' love and God's mercy. And, it's one of those things that I think it's hard to live out sometimes, to know and love others. And I see that as an example in your life often. And I think there are pieces of that have healed your past as you've lived out the love of Jesus and showing that compassion to your family and to others around you. It gives you a different perspective. You say, I remember when $25 meant the world to my family. It meant whether we ate for the week. And so
I was just explaining this to somebody. So we used to get food stamps sporadically as a kid. I got all the government cheese and peanut butter. You'd go and stand in line and get those things. But we would get food stamps, and my mom would give me $1, the actual stamp, tear it out and give it to you. And I would take it into the store and buy a 3-cent piece of gum, and they would give me 97 cents back. So I would give that to my mom and dad so they could buy other things, whether that was cigarettes or meat or milk, like things that you couldn't always get with just food stamps that, of course, they spend it on whatever. But I remember that. We take so many things for granted now. I do. To get in your car and push the button or turn the ignition and it starts. That was always an adventure for us. The fact that you had enough gas to get from point A to point B without running out. I don't have enough fingers and toes how many times we ran out of gas going somewhere. And you had to rely on the kindness of strangers or someone, that was our life growing up. And it's such a different world than the life that our daughter Marin has, she's wonderful. But it's such a unique thing.
So tell me a little more about how you've become wiser and grown your relationship with the Lord.
I'm definitely more mature now, and I don't want to give the impression that it was like a switch was flipped and that, I'm now this completed work. I am not. You're well aware. You can probably attest to that. It's so crazy. 34 years ago today was our first date. I know you won't remember that.
I had no clue that this was
34
even
years
a
ago
day.
today, 1992, June the 6th.
I love that you can remember those important things.
I mean, you changed my life. I mean, there's no equivocation. No, yeah. I mean, it may have not been the best thing for you at the time. But yeah, I mean, I was smitten with you. I mean, we met in fourth grade. I'm getting to the question you asked me. There's a point. You, for whatever reason, you were attracted to this little, dirty little kid. We started talking. We had mutual friends. We started talking. I started dating one of your friends, which infuriated you. And we eventually started talking and becoming more serious. And we became boyfriend, girlfriend. But that was looking back on it now, I know that was a toxic relationship because I was not in a position to love anyone healthy. I was very immature in lots of ways, especially emotionally, very stunted. I know you can attest to that, but looking back on it, I see it. So we had I was very insecure, very jealous. And I had no reason to be, but that's just, it was a primal instinct in me. And so we had it was toxic, but it wasn't physically or anything. It was just emotionally I wanted to control you and to, I wanted you to love me the way I needed, but I didn't know what I needed. Does that make sense? Like I didn't know how I needed to be loved,
right,
and supported and cared for. And you challenged me in lots of ways, and I wasn't capable of doing some of that. I still had a lot of hurt and anger. And so as I walked through that, you absolutely were a Christian and were pointing me towards Jesus, even during that time. I wasn't ready, and I didn't have the knowledge and the ability and the skills to manage those things and to be in a real relationship. So, we were together for many years, and then you wised up, and which I know was very painful at the time, but we broke up, and you broke my heart. Literally, just heartbroken, and I can still remember that feeling. It's so visceral to me, because you were more than just like a girlfriend. You were such a big support system for me. I didn't have basic skills and abilities. We joke about this. I couldn't pick up the phone and call to get information for something. I couldn't talk to people. I couldn't, just basic things that everyone takes for granted. I did not have those abilities, and I used you for those things a lot. Do you kind of remember that?
I do remember that. And that was back in the day when you had hair. And I remember you'd be like, I need a haircut. And I'm like, go get a haircut. And
it sounds so trivial now.
It seems so small, but you wanted me to call and get a hair appointment for you.
I thought I was going to embarrass myself in front of everyone and everything. Like I was so self-conscious, not just of how I looked and I was so self-conscious of saying or doing something that would reveal who I was and how I grew up, and what and I just thought, you're going to think less of me. You're going to treat me badly. You're not going to like me, because once you really know who I am, so I always thought everyone was judging me, and forever. And so I relied on you for lots of basic trivial things, which looking back, I recognize. I'm like, so dumb. But from my little
it was
brain,
small and silly.
Yeah.
But there was a point that I had to put up some boundaries, because I recognized that things were unhealthy. Your conversation towards me changed. And
I didn't talk. I didn't speak to you with respect or kindness. And the sad thing is, I think I talked to you like I heard my father talk to my mother. Whether it was maybe not exactly the same, but I was a product of my environment.
Yeah. And I remember having those conversations that our relationship is not going to be their relationship. And that's where the lines had to be drawn.
It's so interesting that you would say that, because I made conscious choices and decisions not to be my brothers and sisters or my mother and father. We've joked about this. I've never tasted coffee. I'm 50 years old. Why is that? Because my dad drank coffee when he wasn't drinking beer all day and all night. If it was 11:30 at night, he was still drinking caffeinated coffee. It was something. I just associated those things with him. And so I didn't drink alcohol. I never smoked a cigarette, and I never drank coffee because again, this is a very immature way of saying, I was a little kid. Those are the things that, I equated those things with him and with a certain behavior and attitude. I don't want to be that. I don't want to. And so I'm never going to do those things. The same thing with drugs and alcohol. My brothers and sisters, I'm never going to do those things because this is where it leads. And so I know it sounds silly. Even today, you're like, you've never tasted coffee? Yeah. In the back of my brain somewhere, I equate that with my father, who it wasn't a good thing.
Yeah. So you set those limits for yourself.
Yes. And so you would think I would have done a similar thing with our relationship or the way I treat people. I was very, I was very yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, thank you, please, those kind of things, because I knew that's what people expected. That's not what I was taught at home.
You learned how.
I was trying to adapt and to mold myself into what I thought people wanted. And you've said it. I was pretty good at that. Again, probably not as good as I think I was. I had fooled everybody. No one knew I only had 2 pairs of pants in high school. Did you? I literally had 2 pairs of pants in high school, and one had a giant hole on my thigh that progressively got bigger. And to me, I thought people just think I love these pants. Nope, they're the only pants I got. Isn't that a crazy?
It's fine.
I don't know if it's fun. It's just silly. I developed these coping mechanisms and these strategies, these things to help me just survive.
And that's okay. That's okay because God used that as strengths later.
He did.
And in the past, you have talked about your testimony in terms of Joseph in the Bible. Oh, yeah. And there are a lot of parallels there.
I'm now king.
And you are king of our home. I think that is helpful in order to see that things that the world would normally look at as pitfalls. The things that you think no one can come back from that. No one can be sold into slavery and live in prison for years and have a hope and a future of actually ministering to people and saving a nation from famine. And
I don't equate myself quite with Joseph. I see God's faithfulness. I see his faithfulness through that. And he used all of these horrible things to happen to Joseph to then impact the kingdom and to impact, of course, millions of people ultimately. But I see where God has been faithful to me. And he used these hurts that I wouldn't change any of that. He's used those things for my good. What a crazy thing to recognize and to be able to see now.
It's beautiful. And that's everyone's hope. So let's talk about specifically how you've used those hurts. I'm thinking of the men's group that you formulated. And will you talk a little bit about how the Lord led you into that and how that
Yes, absolutely. We did end on a cliffhanger of you breaking my heart.
Oh,
and
let's definitely talk about.
But it all actually gets there, I promise. So you made the wise decision that was very painful at the time that this relationship wasn't going to work, and you stuck to it, which was in hindsight was amazing because I'm pretty awesome. And so we were apart. We didn't talk. We didn't see each other for almost a year. And during that time, I know it seems like a really short time, my relationship with the Lord grew. My maturity completely changed. My appreciation for you and who you are and what you believed and just the person was completely revolutionized. I mean, and that's really an understatement. Again, this is God's goodness to me. I no longer viewed you as this support or crutch or just instrument that I needed to make it through my day, to make it through my life, to get where, to survive. I didn't see you that way anymore. And I really didn't think we were ever going to get back together. I didn't think it was, I thought that was the chapter had closed. But it allowed me to mature and grow during that time. I had people who pushed me in that direction even during that time. And so then when we did start talking, you did see a change in me. I wasn't perfect. I wasn't but there was a change in the way I talked to you and the way I treated you and just my outlook. And so that was a very wise thing that you did that was very hard and painful at the time for me.
It was painful for me as well.
Oh, I know that. I mean, again, I'm awesome. But of course, I'm myopic, I'm egotistical, and I can only see things from my perspective at that point. And so as we then started talking, getting back together and going down that path, I was committing myself more and more to the Lord. I wouldn't say I was the leader of our household. I mean, ultimately we started talking and dating again. And I don't know, 6 months later, I asked you to marry me. You said yes. I had a frightful conversation with your father before I asked you. And they were very kind and gracious, your mother and father were, and said, yes, you can do this. And so we got married, and they've been such a huge blessing to us for years and years and years. But the funny thing is, when we first got married, we got married in the church we met and grew up in. And we immediately knew that this was not the church for us. And so we decided we were going to visit churches. And our first visit was to Heritage Baptist Church. And 26 years later, we've never left. We never visited anywhere else. And as funny as our friends came with us, and they never came back. So, I mean, it's been such a blessing. I met Barry Young, who's still one of my best friends, was the children's pastor here. You knew Barry from campus. From
college, yes.
Yeah. And he poured into my life at that time. He was we liked a lot of the same things, and he was our CG leader, our Sunday school. Did we call him Sunday school class at that time?
I think they were Sunday school classes. Yeah.
He was our teacher. He and Mindy led our group, and I became better friends with him. And as he poured into my life, and as I sat under Pastor Reggie's preaching and teaching and discipleship, my understanding of who God is was completely changed. I finally understood what mercy and grace were. I understood that Jesus' sacrifice was good forever. Like, it wasn't time limited. It wasn't
dependent on you.
It wasn't dependent on me. And it was, and I know I touched on this. There was such a freedom in that. And so that's really where I say I became a Christian. It wasn't every Sunday I rededicated my life to the Lord. I recommitted. I had backslid through the week, and now here I was again on Sunday. It was no longer that. And so I asked Barry to baptize me here. And that's where I really definitively go, I'm a Christian, and I profess Jesus as my Lord and Savior from that point forward. And I never waffle on that. Am I always right? I mean, do I always feel like I'm leading the perfect life and I'm the perfect husband and father? No, of course not. But that's where kind of is the genesis for me of where I look back and I go, yes, I'm going to walk this way. And so as you're well aware, it took many years for me to become the leader of our family, of our house. The spiritual leader. There were fits and starts and struggles through that. And I think we both suffered because of that early in our marriage. But again, God is good and faithful and just, and he's helped me through this process. I craved discipleship and mentorship, and I felt like I wasn't getting it in different ways at Heritage through the years. I mean, it's been a roller coaster in some ways. There were times when you wanted to leave.
Yes.
You weren't happy here. And I love Pastor Reggie. He is so wise. I mean, when we brought forth these concerns, he essentially says, well, why don't you do something? Why are you waiting, trusting? Why are you looking to other people to do something? And so I thought, why am I? I mean, if God is calling me to this, then he'll equip me. And so, it's been 8 or 9 years ago that we started a men's group. But before that, I was part of different groups and different men. And I've had multiple mentors here at Heritage, from Ray Hayes to David Persinger to, Barry Young, Pastor Reggie, a multitude of guys who've all poured into my life. And so it's been a neat process, but a few years ago, we started this men's group. It's kind of a discipleship because I was looking to be discipled. I thought, I'll get these guys in here and they won't know it. Undercover, they'll be discipling me. They'll be mentoring me.
Perfect. And
God has allowed me to mentor and disciple them as well. We've joked about it. It's mutually beneficial. It's helped me so much be able to share my life, share my testimony, my walk. These men call me to righteousness. They expect me to lead and to learn.
What does boots on the ground calling you to righteousness look like? Because that's one of those church terms that we might throw in, but when men are actually looking for someone to speak into their life, what does that look like? It's not pretty.
No, practical application of God's word. When guys are, how can I speak and talk into somebody's life about relationships? How do you love your wife? How do you speak to her? How do you care for her? How do you lead your family? This. This life is hard and it is difficult. And just because we're Christians, if anything, we're guaranteed strife. We're guaranteed hardship. That's the life God has called us to be a witness. And so, I'm not unique. Men struggle with drugs and alcohol and adultery and pornography and abuse and relationship, job, all
Surely
of those
they
things.
don't struggle with that if they come to church every Sunday.
I know, shocking. No, we all do. And so
being truthful and honest about where you are.
Being transparent. I mean, how many times have we sat in church and you've sat beside a couple for years and then you find out they're getting divorced? You're like, if I had known. I didn't see anything. They looked
beautiful.
Yes.
Fantastic.
They wear pretty clothes and their children are well behaved and they say Christian
for the whole
words.
Hour that they're here, they hold it together.
Yes. But they speak the lingo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And then these men, some of them speak the lingo, but because I'm willing, I think the men in that group that are the leaders originally, Victor Tucker and Scott Newcomb, they were willing to be vulnerable and transparent, and say, I've struggled here. I'm still struggling here. Will you pray with me? Will you pray for me? Will you fast? I'm really struggling in this area of my life. Will you walk with me? Will you hold me accountable? That has been so revolutionary in how I would define Christianity. We're not called to live this in isolation. No man's an island. And we joke and kid about those things, but it's true. I couldn't be the husband and father I am or I hope to be without, of course, with Christ, but without these men coming alongside me and saying, Joey, what's going on?
I will attest to that. I believe that in the 9 years that you have walked transparently with these guys and in turn held them up spiritually and prayed for them and cried with them and directed them to scripture of righteous actions and obedience to the Lord. I have seen that grow you spiritually, and it's kind of hard to speak into somebody else's life and point them to God if you don't know who God is, if you're not allowing Him to lead and guide your life, and if you're disobedient to Him. So it is that two pieces working beautifully together in the body to actually glorify God and live in a way that is honoring to Him and is good for everyone around you. Everyone. I will say directly, I did not want you to give in another place. I did not want you to commit to another thing that you were taking time away from us. And how can you say this is going to be good for our family if you are taking this much time away from our family? Well, I was completely wrong. 100% completely wrong. But it took you saying, no, this is me stepping up to be a leader, and this is me obeying the Lord. And I will do that. And that was a beautiful example for me. That was definitely what our family needed and what God has used just in a wonderful way for healing you, for you recognizing that other people have gone through some of the same things. And that's kind of the premise of why we're talking about these hard things on this podcast, is for us to recognize we're all in this. If we can just be real and authentic and talk about the ugly, we can pull each other along and help each other see the good in the hardships that we've walked through. I've even had people say, yeah, well, I think of Joey. If he could have done that, if he could, put himself together and be successful, that surely I could do a little bit. And you always turn it back to what the Lord has done and how the Lord has restored and how the Lord has put things together. But you are an example, and it's always laughable. If Joey was homeless and now he has a home, we can do this.
I mean, you don't want this podcast to be 3 days long, but I mean, I could just tell you of so many instances where God has been so gracious and kind to me. And again, he's all the hurt, all the pain, all of that, he's used for his glory.
Amen.
Whether in this life or the next. And some of it I don't understand. And some of it he has been, again, kind enough to reveal now to me, this is some of the things I'm using to build your kingdom.
And he continues to give you glimpses of how that hurt can be for his glory, right? As you grow. And even now, I continue to see that in my own life. Joey, I could see us coming back and hitting some of these spots again and talking in depth. We barely skimmed the surface of the goodness of God and how he's used your life. I know there's so many more things that we can talk about. Maybe we will again, if you would be agreeable to that.
I would be happy to.
Is there anything that you would like to leave the listeners with? Any last words that you would like to share? I'm thankful for the journey. I am. I'm thankful for the people God has placed in my life. I'm so thankful how they have pointed me to him. He has used events and circumstances, but more importantly, people who have just, in the most innocuous ways, like they don't have any idea how they pointed me to Jesus and how they reflected his glory. And so I to me, it's such an encouragement, and it gives me a sense of purpose. Every conversation, every interaction, we have the opportunity to reflect the love of Christ. It's good. It's a good reminder, because we don't know what people are walking through. We don't know what is hurting them, and if we just are mindful of what God may be doing and how he could be using us, and sometimes just being obedient to say the things that you are willing to say and share your heart with people in a place of vulnerability.
I don't think you can suppress the joy of the Lord. And so I think it's okay. Like, let it out and be joyful.
That's good.
Not happy, but joyful.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. I think that is definitely a good example of your life, showing the joy of the Lord. Joey, thank you so much for sharing your story for his glory. It's been a pleasure. It's been a joy for me, and it's been a touching and moving moment. Thank you.
Thank you.